Hey everyone, this is George Soto and you're watching Startups Unedited.
Hey everyone, this is George Soto with Soto Ventures. Hope all is well. Today I'm with Randeep Wilkhu, who is an investor, co-founder, board member, advisor. I mean, just all-around stud in the London and or UK European startup community. Randeep, how are you?
I'm good. How are you, George?
I'm doing pretty good. Thanks for taking the time to chat today. I know it's getting later in the day, so I really appreciate it. Randeep, why don't you take a second to just kind of tell the audience a little bit about your professional background and how you got into startups?
Sure. I was originally born and brought up in Kenya. I spent the first 19 years of my life there. Spent a lot of time working with my dad in the restaurant business. So always had that kind of entrepreneurial kind of background from him. Came to university to London, did my computer science degree there, and then worked in corporate startups during the dot-com. Had my first startup in 2001 called Lookout For. This was the time when Yellow Pages had lost their kind of monopoly kind of status and change in legislation. So we built a portal that significantly undercut Yellow Pages, but maybe timing wasn't right or had bad management. So for various reasons, shut it down after about a year, and then went back into working for a couple of startups there, and then worked my way through, worked for in various roles from being a developer to product management, product marketing, strategy. So we really have been fortunate and lucky enough to have worked across the board. And Prior to joining the venture capital business, I was working for Deutsche Telekom, doing some strategy work for them, and I was responsible for location-based services. And this was a time when lots of investments were happening. Google Maps had just come into the market, and I was responsible for the sale of a company called T Traffic from Deutsche Telekom to Navtech. So it was a nice exit for Deutsche Telekom, and that's when I was poached by T Venture, and they asked me whether I was keen to join. So for the last 7 years, I've been with T Venture. Again, I've been very fortunate to work with some very smart guys. Been lucky enough to have I made some great investments, have some great returns. So I'm pretty lucky, I guess. Yeah,
That's
that's my
awesome.
background so far.
Awesome. Now you're currently in the UK, and I know you spent some time in Germany. What's kind of like the culture, what I'm asking is specifically like the corporate culture around M&A. So I was actually interviewing a Berlin-based startup thought leader, Olga Steidl, a couple weeks ago, and she was talking about how like the culture of M&A in at least from her view in Berlin is just not there yet. Do you see any differences between, let's say, the German market, which we all know is a strong European market, versus the UK versus the rest of Europe?
Yeah, I think it definitely makes a difference. I think especially in comparison to US, because most of the buyers are really in the tech industry are sitting in the US. So when they look at acquisition, there's some great companies across Europe, but language plays a significant role whether a deal happens or not. So London's probably a kind of stronger place to actually start a company, but Berlin's catching up. I've been involved in a company where we tried to sell the company around 3 times. They were the European leader, but it was very difficult to sell because every time you got the CEOs of the US company and the German company, there was always that cultural conflict, and it just didn't happen. So you see these differences. So I would say but Berlin, I guess, is still catching up and it's getting there fast. And in general, the M&A activity is improving, but it's still far from the way it is in the US.
Gotcha. What's the current state of the startup ecosystem as you view it from as an investor, as a former founder? What's the current state of the London or UK startup ecosystem?
Sure. So at the moment, I think it's actually very active. It might be active for the wrong reasons because I guess one of the things the UK economy has is the government is providing significant amount of incentives for the general public to invest. So there is significant tax kickbacks. So crowdfunding is increasing significantly. But the downside with that is, you've got lots of companies which typically, shouldn't have been funded in the first place, but do manage to get funding from the crowd, because the crowd are, sophisticated investors. They kind of, follow their gut and make the investment. And one of the things that will work against the London ecosystem is, we are seeing lots of companies that are being formed, and although there are an increasing number of VCs coming up, it's still significantly small in comparison to the new number of startups that are coming in the market. So still, companies still struggle to get their seed 2 or Series A financing, and a lot of companies, you hear lots of companies getting funded from crowdfunding sites, but you never hear these companies actually raising that Series A.
So is this kind of similar to what was happening in the early days of the internet here in the US, where you had a bunch of companies that were getting funded who had no business getting any money, and as a result, they were just kind of raising money on ideas, but there was no substance behind it? Is that what we're saying, or we're just saying that the amount of startups versus the amount of investors are just way too high, and so that supply is not actually being met by the demand of money?
Yeah, I think it's different. I guess in US, you still got all the angel investors are real angel investors. So they do have the background. They've probably had work for, they've got lots of operational experience or VC experience, and they're actively investing. While the crowdfunding sites in UK, the only reason they're investing is because the government is giving them almost 78 to 100% tax kickback. So the risk to them is significantly low. Yeah, so that's the reason why you're seeing lots of companies are saying, why don't I just basically invest instead of my money sitting in the bank, because my risk is almost none.
Gotcha. So it's
So that's
kind of
the
like,
main difference.
got it. So it sounds like there's potentially a lot of noise. It's interesting. I would say probably about 4 or 5 years ago, the incubator ecosystem or community explode here with, of course, driven by Y Combinator and 500 Startups and an AngelPad. I participated in AngelPad, and I remember seeing a lot of the companies, not all of them. There were certainly some great investments that became real companies like Mopub, and you look at the Postmates guys and, Bastian and those folks, and I mean, Buffer, a ton of different companies. And I was speaking to specifically AngelPad. Of course, YC and 500 Startups have yielded a ton of great companies. But I saw a lot of like these founders who maybe, were engineers at Facebook, Google, etc., who had that, resume, and they were able to raise money and had really no business building any business, and couldn't run a team. Are you seeing similar things there?
Yeah, we're seeing some of them. A lot of course, early employees of Google, Facebook in London as well. They are going and starting up a company in stealth mode, raising significant amount of capital. But still, I think it's much smaller than what you see in the US. But on the plus side, having startups have an option to crowdfunding at the moment. They have access to capital. So on the plus side, you do some companies that in the past should deserve some VC capital, just because there wasn't enough VC capital, they wouldn't get capital. But now, because there is more options, it's a much I guess riper environment for startups to kind of survive and kind of grow into a more mature company.
Got it. Well, let's say you're an early stage founder who has an idea, or maybe you have an MVP. What 2 or 3 tips would you give an early stage founder who's sitting in London today, or someone maybe even just in Europe, but we'll just focus on the London market.
Sure.
Who's trying to get this business off the ground, maybe raise some sort of seed round or angel round. What 2 or 3 tips would you provide them?
So I think the biggest thing I always tell every startup, especially in Europe, is make sure you watch your burn. You can get excited. You can start building the product rather than focusing on growth. So that's one thing extremely important, especially because even if they raise $250,000 in a seed round here, which is quite a good amount for London. The next round, if they don't have growth, they'll have to raise another seed round, and because there isn't enough access to capital, they'll struggle. So that's why, always watch your burn, focus on that MVP, try to, prove the product or the business model before really taking the next step and doing some additional kind of marketing spend or sales. I've made that same mistake. I made that mistake in 2001. I've recently incubated a company, Execute Sales. I made the same mistake again, and I'm learning from it. And yeah, so at least I give that advice, and hopefully I won't make that same mistake as well.
It's interesting because I've made similar mistakes, and for me as a non-technical co-founder, I've made the mistake multiple times of getting really excited about an idea and then having to kind of cut corners around recruiting the right team to build the technology, and things like outsourcing to, I guess what it's called now, Upwork or the Odesk and things like that, which, I think you can get some great product built if you understand how to manage outsourced teams, but when we're talking about building a real business, you really, from my view and the mistakes that I was referring to, you really need to build a core founding team that has that technical competence, at least to be able to build an MVP and get you actually, even a chance to compete. So Randeep, thank you so much.
Definitely.
If folks wanted to follow you on social media, send you, let's say, some information about their ideas, or maybe pick your brain for advice, what are the best social channels to reach you, and what are your handles?
Yeah, I guess I do use Twitter a little bit. I'm becoming more active as well. And it's Randeep Wilkhu, my Twitter handle. But I think LinkedIn is still the best option to me. Of course, if startups or founders come through to me via somebody, of course, that's better. But one of the things I always do is, irrespective whether I know somebody or not, I at least respond to him and at least give him some guidance. I've been a founder. I've tried to start up a company, and I know how frustrating it is. And I would say, at least in Europe, another advice, at least for a lot of young companies is or founders, is they should really learn how to use their network more effectively and find better ways of actually expanding that network. Because a lot of people just find an easy way. Let me send an email on LinkedIn. Hey, Randeep, we're looking for a Series Seed. And clearly my profile says we don't do seed investments, but I get tons of requests for seed. And it would have been much easier for these guys just to informally ask me to for some advice or some guidance. And I'm always happy to do that. But I think for London founders, they should really spend time in making sure that they have the right strategy in building their network, because that's what they will need, not only to build a business, but to secure additional financing, etc.
And do you have a tip or two of how these founders should go about building their or expanding upon their network?
Again, in London, I mean, it's become much easier, and same as Berlin as well. There's lots of events going on. Lots of entrepreneurs getting together. There are lots of co-working places. Lots of incubators. So tons happening there. I myself, I'm involved in 2 incubators and also in Founders Institute. I'm only doing that purely because I kind of enjoy being there for the startups, but of course I'm interested in also kind of expanding the business that I've built in the past. Execute Sales is one of them, which is something that we're trying to extend. And so that's the reason why I've spent a lot of time, I guess, going to these events, networking with founders, and of course corporates as well, for the customers.
Well, just to point out, we actually met at the Sales Stack conference in San Francisco.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? So that's a good example. Well, Randeep,
exactly.
I really appreciate your time. Have a wonderful day, and I will see you soon. I'm sure I'll be out in Europe shortly.
Yeah, sounds good. Thanks a lot, George, for your time.
Have a great one.